Okay, so I really want you to listen up because I'm delighted to introduce Jane Finnis of Culture 24. Who came to the last Hello Culture, which I think was 18 months or so ago? Wasn't Jane brilliant then? She's really great. And I think you'll remember her challenging, but actually quite supportive call for us to think about and get real about our web presence. I was looking up online because that's what you can do nowadays. It's not stalking at all. She said her inspiration is to try and keep track of what's happening in the online world, creatively and commercially. And she gets inspired by things that make me think differently, feel more connected, and make me laugh. Well, I'm pretty sure that she's going to do all three things today. She'll get us to think differently, make us feel connected, and hopefully have a few laughs along the way. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jane Finnis.
Hi everybody, and thank you for that very nice introduction. I've worked in the arts for a long time and digital since anybody used the word digital. And I've been thinking a lot about where are we as a sector in embracing digital change? And where are we in evolving our practice to all the fundamental changes that we all see and experience around us? And we all know people in our lives who say things like, "Oh well, I'm not a digital person. Digital's not for me." And that, my sister's one of those people, and we all know them. But are they people that we work with? Are they people in the arts? And if I would like to suggest that if they're people who are in senior positions in the arts, that's not cool. It's not professional, and it needs to change. And the organisations that are changing are the ones that have people at the top who understand the way in which technology is changing behaviours. Look at those slides. That we need to, as a sector, we need people in senior positions who understand the nature of Twitter and open licensing and crowdsourcing and blogging. They need to know what the social ecosystem is. And if they're avoiding that, resistance is futile, I think. We need as a sector to understand the technologies and crucially how those technologies affect people's behaviours. And we need to be able to look at the data that's happening in the way people are using stuff. And if you're not using data, well, if we're all not using data in our online activities to inform our decision making, or if we're not using the data in interrogating how our audiences are behaving with our content, or we're not checking to see whether the online publishing that we're doing, we understand the purpose of that and we know what's happening. If we're not looking at that data, my guess is that we're probably failing. We're failing to know what the difference is between the content that is engaging people and the content that isn't. We're failing to know how to make things better, with how to spot the things that are starting to work and how to build on those. And we're failing to be responsive to the changing behaviours that are happening. We're failing to know how to invest wisely and how to get better. And worse than failing, we probably don't even know that we're failing, because if we're not looking, we don't know what's wrong. So it's really important, I believe, that we try and understand more about our audiences and the touch points that we have with them, on and offline. So we're all people, and we need to be thinking about the whole consumer, people before they visit, while they visit, after they visit, and what are the behaviours in those different spaces. And we need to really understand how mobile technologies and social networks are changing that, and understand the subtly different the behaviours are all subtly different depending on the motivations of the person. Now, no one under 20 even uses the word digital anymore. They don't talk about digital, anything. Digital is just a part of everything. And for lots of people, I thought this is quite an interesting statistic, a lot of people are beginning to think that internet should be a human right. If you're under 20, you probably believe this. I know my kids do. It's like, where's the Wi-Fi? Why isn't there a Wi-Fi? They expect, the generation that are coming up, expect things to be connected. They expect them to be open. They expect them to be available. And crucially, they expect them to be shareable and reusable. You know, they want to go and find stuff they like and put it into their networks and do stuff. And that's a behaviour that we need to kind of get our heads around. Now, the good news is that we, as a cultural sector, we have stuff that people actually love. We have things that are transformative. I think, so there's some incredible statistic in the last year, 50% of the population went to a museum. And people do love culture. The bad news in all of this is that understanding what's going on and looking at data takes time. It takes time and effort, and we as a sector are all under pressure, and sometimes that time is something that we don't have. Just going to get some water. So, I wanted to say something about attention share. When I came here a couple of years ago, I talked about a statistic that came out of Hitwise that was looking at what is the attention share that the top 40 arts websites in the UK got. Attention share as in the percentage of attention from all of the web traffic in 1 month. And at that time, it was 0.04%. So all of the people looking at, in the UK domestic market, looking at websites, 0.04% of them were looking at the top 40, which was a very, very small attention share, okay? I've repeated that experiment to come back here, and it's exactly the same. That top 40 organisations hasn't changed. And then I started thinking, because we now have access to Hitwise, that we can start to do this sort of competitor analysis. I said, well, what if I added in not just the top 40, but everybody else? So I got all the URLs of all the Arts Council NPOs. I got all the National Museum URLs, the National Trust, and everyone, added them all together in Hitwise and looked at the overall attention share of those 744 organisations. Anybody want to guess what it is? Oh, that's generous. 0.08. Okay? So 0.08 is all of them added together. And this is just UK domestic traffic, so it's not true that that those are the real numbers, but it's a benchmark of a very low level of engagement for a particular type of audience. And it's similar to, Tesco, all of them together. So what's the problem? And actually, is there a problem? Because I think that's a good question. Well, the answer might be that people are just not interested. But we know that that isn't true, because we know that in the physical world, people love culture. So maybe it's that these websites are just a bit rubbish. Well, probably that's sometimes true. They're definitely hard to find and reach. But actually, if you think about what's happened to the web now, what is true is that audiences are not really looking at websites so much anymore. They're in the social ecosystem now. They're in Facebook and they're in Twitter. And that is true. So behaviour's changed and people are not in websites. So this is kind of interesting. This is looking at what people do on their mobile phones. 14% of people use their mobile phones and look at stuff through their browser. So they're looking at websites, mobile websites. And 86% of people on their mobile phones use apps. So the majority of the experience is through an app, okay? But they're not the apps that we make. A third of that is gaming, a third of that is social media. The other third, well, it's not even a third, the other, whatever the third is, minus 14%, is all the utilities and news and productivity. There's 3% of other, which is probably where any apps that we make are going to be. So even in this kind of, in this model, the opportunities are probably in that social ecosystem somewhere for contact, unless you're going to be doing able to get into that sort of 3%. So the opportunity lies, I think, around how we can embed stuff into a social ecosystem. So this question is something that I've spent the last kind of 18 months thinking about. Is your content fit for purpose? And what does that mean? And we need, and it's kind of like, if we can't do big, maybe we can't without huge amounts of budget. Maybe if we can't do big, maybe we can do deep. Can we do deep? Maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's about specialist subjects and niche subjects. And when I talk to organisations, we always try and get them to think about this idea of supply and demand, you know. So there's audiences, there's channels, there's your organisation, there's your content. And if you look at the supply model, which is often the one in most cultural organisations that is driving, it's centred around this idea of channels. We have to build something. We've got to be present everywhere. We need to be on Facebook. Quick, make a Pinterest page. This is the thing everybody's doing. You know, 2 years ago it was apps. Now it's all the social networks. It's build, be present everywhere. And the content is your stuff, but crucially your brand. And people are trying to put some kind of wall around that. If you switch that round to a kind of more demand-led model, it's your drivers become your core mission of your organisation, what it is you're trying to do, and the motivations and behaviours of people, and where those things connect. So if you just go back for a minute to the supply model, if you're driven by your brand and building and being present everywhere, the supply model that changes, so the channels become about communities. They're not about being everywhere. They're about finding the community for the subject that you have. And your content becomes the assets that you use to do that. So it's a very different way of thinking about what you have and who you are as an organisation. Yes, you have to be driven by your mission, but your content is about how you use that as an asset to reach the communities, to reach that mission in response to behaviours. So it's a very different way of looking at things. To kind of help you think about that a bit, I've got some examples of things that I think are very nicely illustrate fit for purpose. This guy is a YouTuber, massive, 2.5 million, I think he's one of the biggest. Charlie is so cool, like. So I picked this because it's sort of cultural-ish. He runs this channel he does all these fun science videos. And he's got a really nice mixture of his personal interest. Yeah, he really likes science. He wants to make it more fun. He's talking about it in a way to appeal to a particular audience of people his age. He's in the right channel for that audience, and he's using the right tone of voice, and he's getting that mixture of stuff right in that channel, the content, the audience, the tone of voice, everything. This is really nice. This is the Photographers Gallery's Instagram stuff. They were using Instagram like lots of people do to put out pictures of their stuff. And then they switched it round and said, well, actually, no one's really looking at the pictures that we put out. Why don't we curate Instagram of other people's pictures? Because that fits more our mission as an organisation around, let's curate Instagram as a space. And they've had much more success and engagement, rethinking how they're doing that. And the Rijksmuseum, I don't know if those of you that have been following what's happened, they've released all of their digital collection in high resolution online under open licenses. And they've also created this thing called the Rijksstudio, which has nearly 150,000 studios in, which is basically modelling the kind of practice that they want people to have. So they're basically saying, here's all our content, and we've created a studio for you to come and play with it in, because we want you to play with it, we want you to use it, make things with it, and do stuff. Because that is our mission, to connect people to the culture of the Netherlands, which is their mission. So they want people to use it and come and do it. And this is some of the stuff. They're even doing awards for some of the nicest stuff that's coming out. And these are the sorts of things that people are doing with collections, making temporary tattoos and making incredibly beautiful lingerie and things to decorate your scooter. And then they've also got a partnership with Etsy. So they're making it really, really easy for a community who have a behaviour of making and selling to kind of draw in stuff from what they're doing. And I think that's a really lovely follow through of a complete fundamental change in their organisational strategy. So I've been thinking about all this stuff for a while. We've been doing at Culture 24 this work called Let's Get Real. We've produced a couple of reports. That's the first one. This is the second one. You can download them from weareculture24.org.uk if you want to read them. They're a good read. They ask lots of difficult questions and they're full of some good case studies. We've worked with 50 organisations over 3 years, 2 conferences, 2 reports. And this is the sort of methodology that we're now working on, which is pretty simple, actually. Look at what you've got. Understand more about your audiences. What could you do to get fitter? Is it measurable? And have a go. And it's not, this stuff isn't really, it's simple, but it is actually quite difficult. And then if you're interested, we're doing the next conference in September in Brighton on the 18th. Just a little plug there if you're around. We're going to be talking about all this stuff more. But out of all of this work and research, we've come up with this thing, which I find quite useful in trying to think about how you create a sort of map around understanding motivations and behaviours. So it's kind of thinking about the different sorts of motivations and behaviours, unpacking that a bit, niche interests, professional, sightseeing, family focused. Crucially, thinking about people's information needs. Are they functional? Do they want to learn something, plan something? Are they recommending something? Or do they have an emotional need? Are they looking for excitement or surprise or sharing? Yeah. Their time. Are they before? Is it before they visit? Is it during? Is it after? And what kind of behaviours do people have? Are they the reluctant person or are they fully digitally engaged? Now, I've got kind of interested in this area, probably because of all the stuff around attention share being so difficult and big being so hard, and that actually if you can connect with people emotionally, that's much more meaningful and satisfying. And I think probably because actually as a human being, I prefer things that I connect with personally. So I want to just give you a quick overview of a project that we've been working on that is trying to do exactly this, just to sort of unpack that idea a bit. So it's called vangoyourself.com. It went live on the 14th of May. It's part of this thing called Europeana Creative, which is a big Europeana program funded by the EU, and it's a proof of concept. So the idea is it's trying to prove the concept that you can connect people emotionally with stuff. That's what we were trying to prove. And we came out of a co-creation workshop and the Europeana have been funding it, which is great. We had this as our starting point. Are you tired of just looking at paintings? So there's a painting. And so the idea was that you recreate paintings with your friends. And this was the first one we did in the restaurant at the evening on the workshop. We did the Last Supper and we had so much fun doing it. Even the people who thought it was a rubbish idea, who didn't want to do it, really had a good time. And it was that moment when we made that I thought, actually, we're onto something here. This is good. This is people are connecting with this. As I said, it's supported by Europeana Creative. It's Culture 24 working with an organisation in Luxembourg called Plurionet. And we designed it as a mobile-first thing. It's not an app. It's actually a responsive website. It's just built in WordPress. It was a very small budget, but because it was a proof of concept. And one of the hardest things building it was to keep it simple, to keep that tired of just looking at paintings, recreate them with your friends as a ring-fenced idea, as a core idea, that there's a particular behaviour you want, which is for people to recreate stuff with their friends. That is it. Going for that and sticking with that. So there's 3 easy steps. You pick your favourite painting to recreate, you recreate it, you get ready, you upload it, and then you share it in social channels. That's what it looks like on a desktop with some of the recreations that we're curating. And we started with 50 paintings. This is some of them. These are the institutions that we've been working with. And the key to all of this is that paintings with open licenses. Reasonable resolution, open license stuff. So hard to get, so hard to find. The rights are really unusual. Other organisations are following suit, but unless this stuff is open, people can't come and take it and share it and make things with it like we wanted to do. So this is the kind of responses that we've been getting from people. So these are just coming out of the web. 8 dandies in Balham contemplating supper. So there's a group of guys. God knows how they found this project, but they did it and did a really, I think that's just such a great recreation. I love it. And then the idea is you do that and then you get the call to push it out. Here's some area organisers from the National Women's Register, actually in a hotel in Birmingham, which is nice. Because they put the name of their organisation, I went and looked them up, and I found their Facebook page where they were sharing it and having this whole conversation about, oh, this is really good fun, and we should do this at every single one of our meetings, and this is a great way for us all to come together and do something. And then I began to realise how this was giving people something that it was a sort of social, becoming a social experience, this idea of recreating something. So the Last Supper has been a really popular one. This is a group of chefs doing something. So obviously this kind of whole social thing, as we know, is very important. Here's a group of chemistry students just before their last exam. So like really different kind of takes from very different groups of people. This is a group of young dancers, and this is nice because the comment talks about them arguing over who's going to be the dog. Which is, hysterical. And obviously, it's very hard to track how the sharing is going on, but we're sort of trying to follow stuff. So people are doing all sorts of weird things and sending it off into their social networks. This is nice, kind of an individual connecting through their own practice, through music, but he's obviously trying to get it right, looking in the wrong direction. It's kind of funny. And then this is brilliant. This is him in his painting. So he's the artist recreating a portrait of another artist with their artwork in the background. So these people are actually genuinely connecting through their own identities with these pieces of work and putting that out and giving it back to us. In the dining room, with thanks to Jane next door, that wasn't me, who obviously took the picture. This is just a beautiful, really thoughtful recreation. This one is from a photography student, which is, again, really a really nice modern sort of twist on an old picture. Leeds, the sad eyes drew me to recreate this painting. And some people are doing things that are funny or perhaps a little challenging religiously. But then you get this kind of response, which is very humorous, but you also get this, which is really tender and lovely. So somebody putting up their partner and their newborn baby. So we're getting really quite a breadth of emotional connections. This is great. We were starting to get stuff with some schools using things. We like this painting because of the blood. And it's really well done. It's with the red tissue and the blood and stuff. Loads and loads of selfies. I mean, this guy really looks like him. This woman's been in his room in Arlennes. This kid talking about, his granddad's an artist. So lots of connections. And this is lovely. I wonder if it ever crossed his mind that strangers in the future would be paying homage to such a beautiful painting. So I think that the key, that what I see looking at the kind of data, if you like, and the behaviours around this, is that, yes, the content had to be fit for purpose. The paintings had to be there. They had to be open licenses. They had to be high res. They had to be available. But the important thing is that there is a space for the user. There's a space for people to connect emotionally. There's a space for personal stories and interpretations, and a space for individual meanings and interpretations. Now we're curating this site, but we've also decided to look at, we've got a lot of submissions that we're not putting up on the site, so we're just sticking everything that comes in on a Tumblr, and the Tumblr looks like this, which is kind of, it goes on and on and on, and we've got loads and loads and loads of these sort of weird selfies where people just sticking any old picture next to any old painting, which is a really kind of interesting response. I mean, I'm not quite sure what we're going to do with that. But in a way, I kind of almost like the Tumblr more than the website, because it makes the genuine recreations really stand out better. But we've seemed to be onto something, I think, here, around this idea of personal connection. And I think that's because it allows us to keep the user behaviour and the user motivation, that desire to connect to something as yourself as an individual, that's really at the heart of the project. So I'd like to stop there. Thank you very much for listening.
We'll put you where we can see. Bear with me a minute. So Jane, thanks for that.
I'm sure there are lots of questions from the audience, but I'm going to just kick off one while you, in case there aren't, and in case you give you a minute to think about it. That model that you showed us, the demand, or the, you know, are you going to be demand-led, are you going to be supply-led? I've read elsewhere on some of your work that actually there's an opportunity for if an organisation really took this on board, really wanted to be led by building communities and finding the right channel, all the stuff you talked about. You know, I think at one point you went, what would a museum look like if that was like, I'd like to lead an organisation like that. Could you tell us a little bit more about... Sorry, is that a bit unfair? But it's what do you think it could be like, or what do you think would happen or occur differently in organisations like that?
Okay, I guess before I answer the question, I think it's important to say that I don't think that being an organisation that would take a more of a supply-based model means that your unique voice as an organisation needs to disappear. I think it's very important that the authority that people have and the vision people have and the disruptive nature of often artists and curators to sort of look at things differently, that is absolutely has to stay intact. That's the kind of part of the supplier mission that's around your core, really understanding your core mission. So I think sometimes when I say that, I think people imagine this world where everything's driven by sort of users in some sense. And I think the organisational mission is very, very important in that. But in answer to the question, what would it be like to be responsive? I think it literally has to be the whole organisation from the bottom up, absolutely everything. From when you walk in through the door, every contact point that you have physically and every contact point you have digitally needs to be dealing with your need and behaviour as an individual and understanding where you are in what you're trying to do. I mean, the Rijksmuseum had the, I guess it's an opportunity, or which is unusual, to shut. Yeah. So they shut and they rethought everything. The Cooper Hewitt Design Museum in New York, I've been shut, and they've been rethinking everything. And I know the people on the inside of both of those organisations, and that the digital part of everything that they're doing is absolutely, completely connected. The physical gallery, everything in the physical gallery, all the information, all the learning materials, all the stuff that's published on the web, all the things in social media, everything that used to be called marketing, everything that used to be called curator in the curator's stuff, is all connected internally in some digital infrastructure so that things can be reused, so that information the high resolution images, the right tagging, the right labeling, if you can get that content fit for purpose, it can be reused in multiple ways by everybody in the organisation doing whatever their job is. And I guess that's where I would start, is connecting everything up.
But that's, of course, a big challenge.
It is a big challenge.
It's a big challenge if you have to stay open and keep the data.
Well, if you're a small organisation, it's not such a big challenge, actually. It's much harder if you're a big institution. If you're a small arts organisation, if you don't have a massive collection, if you don't have if you're not a museum or a gallery with loads of digital stuff, then it is much easier, I think. Or it should be.
Or could be.
It could be, yes.
Any questions from the audience? Because I'm conscious of time, so I don't want to use up all my time. Has anyone got any questions or comments? We will need to wait for the roving mic, just because otherwise it doesn't get picked up on the stream. So, and once you get your mic, if you can also just give us your name, that would be great. Thank you.
Hi there, my name's Jeremy Pitt. I'm from Design BP. We're a creative engagement agency with a specialism in augmented reality. I just wonder how you thought, or if you thought, that augmented reality could play a big part in heritage and other cultural organisations, such as the ones you've spoken about.
Okay, can I just intervene? Do people know, I'm not being funny, do people know what augmented reality is? Because I didn't, and it had to be explained to me. Be brave. If you don't, okay. Off you go.
Oh, you're asking the wrong person. I really don't like augmented reality. I don't have a personal connection to it, and I'm very driven by personal connection. I've seen some archaeology, some uses of it in archaeology, where you kind of think, okay, I get it. it's a recreation of something that you can't possibly recreate. But it's not a technology. I think it's a technology that's at a stage, and that it's going somewhere else, and where it might go is likely to be more interesting than where it is now. I guess it depends what you were trying to do. If you had a really good reason, then I'm sure there's a way to use it. But it's not. I've seen lots of bad uses of it, so I'm sorry.
No problem.
Hopefully you didn't build any of them.
Not at all, no.
Okay, there's a lady right at the front. We're going to have to run around. If you just bear with. So my understanding of augmented reality is, you know, in the Olympics when they had the red line that showed you how somebody was going to beat the world record. Of course, the red line wasn't really in the pool. That was created apparently by augmented reality. But that is the end of the end of my augmented reality knowledge.
I'm not sure that's
Hello,
right.
my name is Maria. I'm from University of Warwick. I'm doing my master here, but originally I'm from Moscow. And I know that in my academy, I graduated from Theatre Academy, GITIS. Students in drama department, they used to make this exercise with the painting as exercise as a part of study. So, and I think that to a certain extent it's just we transfer something that we're doing in reality or in some professional things in a digital place. And what do you think? I think that maybe we need more digitally native things.
Yeah, maybe. It's not a new idea. I mean, things that people like are very rarely new ideas. They're always recycled. This idea of connecting, it's a bit like when you physically walk into a gallery or an exhibition and you look around the room and suddenly there's one picture you want to walk towards, and that's not a new behaviour, and that's a bit like browsing that painting. So you're quite right. It's just trying to remind people that it is that connection that's important, and that you could set out to do that and use a much more complicated technology. But I'm not interested in projects that are led by technology. I'm interested in projects that are led by good ideas, and if the good idea required more complicated technology, then brilliant. You know, there's fantastically complex stuff that is built, but that's not an example of it. That's an example of just understanding the connection.
And sorry, isn't it the more complex the technology, the more likely it is not to work, and therefore for it to get in the way of that very engagement you were talking about?
Well, if it's not a technology that people have a behaviour to use regularly, then you've got a problem before you've even started. It's a bit like AR. Lots of people are not using AR. So even if you build something and it is brilliant, how is anyone ever going to look at it, because they haven't got the app or whatever, or you know.
Next question. Sorry, gentleman there, and then right at the back, during which I'll do some filler. Okay.
Matt Adams from Blast Theory. I wondered what your take, Jane, is on how you sort breadth of engagement from depth of engagement. You know, one of the dangers in data is that people get wildly excited about numbers, and we in culture are not really engaged in the process of numbers. You know, Duchamp's urinal was not a success because of the breadth of engagement. That's
a tweet. That's such a tweet.
I wonder how you how you've begun to try and sort that out beyond really complex qualitative assessment.
Well, you can actually, if you sit and look at the statistics of any digital system, you know, if it's Google Analytics or Facebook Insights or stuff, you have the numbers of stuff, and that most strategically, I think, we're all sort of driven to report these numbers as if they're important. And I got a suspicion that people, even though they know they're not, they kind of think they are. You know, and no one wants to admit they have very small numbers and that we all have really small numbers. So when you get everyone in a room and they all go like, you know, we actually only had, 1,000 visits to our website in the last month. It's like, oh, we only had 800. So it's like we need to sort of get real about that sort of smallness. But actually understanding behaviours and engagement is really, really hard. And often the digital isn't the way to do that. You actually have to just talk to people. So it's the combination of what patterns of behaviour can you see in the numbers, where people come from, how long they stay. And you can see patterns that suggest engagement, but you don't really know if it's there unless you actually talk to people. So you need online surveys. You need to get people physically in a room playing with what you've made, even if it's just 3 people in your office, you know, for an hour, and you give them each a cup of tea and a biscuit for helping you or something. That you can get so much from someone who's had nothing to do with what you've built, looking at it through their eyes. So, you know, there's complicated systems. There's fantastic stuff like, it's called Silverback that Clear Left produced, which does all this videos, you know, records people, what they're doing on the screen, their expressions, and that, you know, in the commercial world, this is the complexity that people use to test stuff. In the cultural sector, we don't usually have access to that kind of thing, but you really can do a lot without very much money. But it just is the time. Time is the thing. Time to sit and look at your analytics and look for something that you get a hunch about.
And I'm also very aware that in the audience and listening at home, we'll have people who run smaller organisations who are already time pressed. It is important. It's one of those like important but non-urgent things to do, isn't it? And
I think it's urgent. I
yeah,
really
it's
do.
just,
I don't understand why you would want to carry on doing something if you don't know if it's working or not.
very true.
And you know, we're all being encouraged to invest and do more digital things, and it's kind of like on what basis do we make those decisions for investment and time and employing
and actually
people?
and if you don't do it, you get the sort of knee jerk. This is what you were talking about last time. The knee jerk. We need an app. Everybody run around, find 10 grand and make an app.
And it
doesn't matter if no bugger uses it.
It's the institutional change and the struggle that we're all as individuals having in organisations, I think, is the biggest barrier. I don't think it's anything to do with technology.
Okay. Gentleman in the corner.
Hi, I'm Andy Mabbott. Some of you know me as Pigs on the Wing on Twitter. I've been a Wikipedian in residence at a number of museums and art galleries, and one of the issues that arises regularly is something that you touched upon, which is about the licensing of images, particularly copies of very old paintings where the artist has been dead for 70 years or more. Obviously the Rijksmuseum, as you mentioned, have completely released all of theirs. In America, the law says you can't make a new work simply by taking a flat 2-dimensional copy of such an artwork. In this country, there's no case law, and some museums and galleries contend that they can copyright a new reproduction of an old painting. Given that on the one hand, those paintings, in terms of copyright, belong to all of us, and on the other hand, museums and galleries make a claim that there's no reason for them to invest in taking digital photographs if they can't then monetize them. I wonder if you have a view on what the approach should be.
Let it go, totally, completely. I don't think that they've got any ground to stand on. If the work is physically in the public domain, if you take a picture of it and claim the rights, I think that's wrong. I mean, I completely accept the living artists, you know, people owning their own copyright, wanting to think about that. But releasing stuff that is, you know, it's ridiculous. I don't get it. I think it comes back to the sort of leadership point. It's kind of like someone at the Rijks decided to do this. Somebody senior who got it decided to do it. And somebody senior in one of the big national museums needs to decide to do it. And then it will change.
So how do we persuade them?
I have absolutely no idea. I've been trying.
You and me both.
I keep going on about this stuff, you know, blah, blah, get real, you know. But I don't know. Arts Council, lean on Ed Vaizey.
Do we really have to lean on Ed Vaizey? Because I want to...
I don't know.
I mean, do we mean... I think we just mean
actually, probably, it just takes one person. That's the way to do it. Forget the policymakers. One National Museum director needs to go, OK, we're going to... The Rijksmuseum, I want to be the Rijks of the UK. Let's do it.
So there's... Well, the jobs up for grabs at the National Portrait Gallery. So if any of you want to apply, get in there.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Release it. Hey, could you... Think of the fun you could have recreating the portraits in the National Portrait Gallery.
They'd never let me run the National Portrait Gallery.
Hey, Jane, I think we should start a campaign.
Yeah.
Jane for NPG, heard it here first. I think we've got time for one more question and then we're going to move on. Don't be shy. We still have time for that question, so if you have one. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Can we... we're going to have a couple of minutes just where we have to do a little bit of... a little bit of tech with putting what are those things called? Microphones on our panel members. But while we do that, can we, first of all, really thank Jane for a really challenging and provocative keynote. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So is the chair...